Welcome to Basic Tonal Corrections tutorial in Photoshop. In this segment, we will discuss concepts behind the corrections we will make to correct for tonal range in an image. Unless we're working with an all light or all dark image, then a good image has contrast, shadow detail, clarity, and sharpness. In other words, a good range of levels in the shadows and the highlights. Contrast has deep blacks and sharp whites with nice gray tone in between. When preparing an image for commercial use, we may use it in a number of different mediums in the same advertising campaign. In a magazine or a brochure, which would be the print medium, in a newspaper ad, which is also print, but on much lower quality paper, and perhaps on a website or screen presentation in PowerPoint or Keynote, which is screen viewable media, meaning it works with light instead of ink. Each time we switch media in a drastic way like those examples I mentioned, then we need to prep the image for each media for the best result. For print on paper produced in a commercial printing company, we need to make sure the very lightest areas still have a tone in them, since the color or tone is produced with little dots of ink. In the darkest areas, like as you see here on this picture, we need to make sure the ink is not completely solid. The dots of ink are called halftone dots, and you can see in this example, if we were to take a little patch of this picture and blow it up as you see here, you'll see these halftone dots. Okay, each dot, it's a halftone dot. Ink has a habit of sinking into or spreading when it hits the paper. The tighter the weave of paper, plus its coating, means that the dot stays closer to its original size, but there is still something we call dot gain. Magazine pages and quality brochures are an example that use tighter weave paper. Newsprint, which is one of the nastiest papers on the face of the planet, is very loose weave and soaks up the ink like a paper towel. Very small dots, you can see here, these very small dots, as in the highlights of an image, will move to the middle of the sheet and pretty much disappear. Heavy to solid ink, which you see here in this lower corner of our example, will spread out, and even dark gray will become black. So in other words, these areas where we have small white dots as opposed to small. To compensate, we use a formula to measure the percent of light and dark on the image, and in Photoshop we can control the percent to change it for better overall tone and appropriate amount of ink on paper. So here's a rundown on the basics of the values. So we set these print values, and this is what we're going to use later in this tutorial to prepare the same photograph for different situations. We will be using the info panel, and we'll read our values with an eyedropper with a 3x3 average between the pixels, which means 3x3 means 9 pixels all together. And so we average that tone all together. In print values, when we go and measure in the highlights, we will stick with 5% in the lightest areas. In other words, we will not have complete white. We will still have a little bit of tone in the very lightest areas. In the shadows, we will go to 95% and not all the way to black. And the reason for this is what we do call dot gain. And that means that our dots either disappear in the highlights. So trust me, 5%, those dots may actually disappear when ink hits the paper. In all actuality, the shadows, if we have a small percent where we can have the ink gain, or in other words, those dots, the ink expands and it plugs up those holes, then we will end up with solid black ink, whether we like it or not. With print newspaper values, the highlights are going to be at least 10 to 15% not white. And then the shadows will be 85 to 90% not black. But for web and for screen viewable media, we're okay with that because that is the color of light, and we don't have any variation whatsoever like we would with ink. So what you see is what you get. Here we can go all the way to white, or in other words 0% in the lightest areas and 100% in the shadow areas. So in the next video, we're going to prepare for using these print values, and we're going to do some prep along the way, and so that we could get the right results. See you in the next video.